All right. Good morning, folks. I think this is the first time that I've ever done a live stream during market hours. Anyway, folks, I am open for questions today. I don't have a ton planned. What I really wanted to just talk about and work through today is looking at markets kind of in a rational manner. Let's talk about what to expect. How is this going to affect investments for the future? How is this going to affect your financial future? And let's talk about that now. So, markets are, of course, down at this point. They've been all over the place today, down early as much as 1,700 points. I think yesterday I posted kind of late in the evening when I saw Dow futures that tomorrow might be known as Black Monday. That looks like that's not the case. What I mean by Black Monday is a drop of like 20% in a day. That's only happened a couple times in the history of the market, most notably in 1987. Um, let's think about 1987 for a moment. What happened? The market drops by 25% on that day. I think less than 6 months later, the market had earned back almost all of that and a little bit extra. Couple of folks out there, like Warren Buffett at the time, he actually took no action during that time period. People were screaming at him, "What are you doing?" He was invested mostly in consumer staples at that point, and that's one of the things we should probably look at here is what different sectors are doing in the market. So, Shula's Joe says, "Do you think we are anywhere near the bottom?" Well, I don't know the answer to that question. My guess on that would be simply based on feeling. Right now, I don't think we're near the bottom of the market just because we don't have enough information. And the words that every financial advisor hates to hear because it's generally not true is, it's different this time. It's different this time. So most of the time, it really isn't different. It's just the end of a credit cycle, and it's going to take time to work that out. And then somewhere between 9 and 18 months later, the economy roars back. I think that the average time for a recession to last is something like 18 months, which is 6 quarters. I don't believe we can't really compare what's going on now with what has gone on previously unless we go way back in history all the way to the Great Depression. And then again, it's still not exactly equal. Okay. So the economic conditions are not anywhere near the same. Markets up until recently have been a lot more free than they were back in the 1920s. And we have a lot fewer trade barriers. And the economy of the United States looks very, very different than it did in the 1920s. So we can't really make that comparison. So we don't really have a way to chart waters through here. We kind of have to feel along blindly until we get better data. And better data is not going to happen until second quarter financials come out. Really, this quarter when they start to come out the end of April, early May, when we start to see financial results, we aren't really going to see what's going on because let's remember the vast majority of tariffs were imposed on April 2nd. So we won't see that impact until 1-2 quarters later. And that's going to give us a very good idea of what finances look like. So we're really looking at late July, early August before we have a clear direction on where the economy is going. I will say one thing though, you get a lot of financial writers that predict recessions. You don't tend to get a lot of banks themselves coming out and predicting recessions. I think that JP Morgan came out this morning and said there's a 45% chance of recession. When you look at the history of predictions of recessions, that's an enormous, enormous prediction. Normally, they're very positive on the market because that's simply what they trade. Their answer is all equities all of the time when it comes to these banks. Demo says, buy the dip. You can. I think there's going to be more dips and lower dips here in the future. We are looking at a longer period of volatility. I'm always a big fan of buying dips. You guys know I'm a long-term investor. I don't tend to sell very much. I tend to buy when opportunities look good, and I keep a vast majority of my funds in ETFs and roughly 30% of my portfolio in individual stocks. So that's changed a little bit since the last time I spoke to you guys about my personal portfolio. I'm pretty heavy in cash right now. I moved a lot of money to cash right as Trump was being inaugurated, largely because the stock market, if he was very serious about tariffs, which it's turned out that he is serious about tariffs, that a stock market decline was just inevitable. Normally, I don't make that kind of decision. I did make an exceptional decision in this case for a couple of different reasons. If you look at the history of the largest market declines in the last 10 years, since 2015, let's remember Trump has only been president for 4 out of those last 10 years. But if you look at the top 10 days of loss in the last 10 years, actually 11 out of 10 of those days, meaning the top 11 losses, all occurred while Donald Trump was president. And most of it had to do with the mixed messaging that he was giving markets. And a lot of it had to do with his interference with the Fed as well. That happened the first time around. He tried to put a lot of undue pressure, political pressure on the Fed to do as he wanted. So at some point, Jerome Powell's tenure is going to end, and a new head of the Federal Reserve is going to be appointed. That person is going to be one of Trump's lackeys. I can only hope that whoever new is in charge actually has some degree of integrity and will stick to the Fed's mission, which is controlling inflation and maintaining full employment. That is obviously not going to happen here. I expect the pace of layoffs to actually start picking up here pretty soon. Folks that are in favor of look, tariffs are not always all bad. They really aren't. We need tariffs in place to protect critical industries in the interest of our national security. Every country does this. We have freer markets than we've ever had in the past, but it doesn't mean they've ever been completely free. Our auto industry would not survive if we didn't have tariffs, if we didn't have ways to incentivize manufacturers to come over here and build factories. It's just a simple fact that the vast majority of our vehicles simply aren't competitive in foreign markets. And and due to the trade barriers, our car companies probably would have gone out of business in the 1980s and 1990s if it weren't for trade barriers. But anyway, we can continue to talk about that later. You guys go ahead and fire away with questions if you have them. I'm here to answer those questions. But let's take a look at the best performing sector in the market real quick. I talked to you guys earlier this year about rotating to consumer staples, getting away from anything that was deemed as a consumer, discretionary. If we look at the consumer staples index year to date here, we are down about 1.32% as compared to the rest of the market. Right, or as compared to where it was at the beginning of the year. That is largely because people are rotating out of investments where you spend money because you want to. It's discretionary spending. It's luxury, not just luxury items, but anything that you don't necessarily need. Rotating into consumer staples means that you're buying into companies that sell the products that you have to buy, that you don't necessarily have a choice. Think like toothpaste, razors, food products, that sort of thing. That has been the best investment so far this year in terms of sectors. If we look at consumer discretionary has dropped like a rock throughout the year. Okay. It has absolutely dropped like a rock. And if you look at today, it's down big. If you look at today in terms of other aspects of the market, technology and consumer staples have absolutely dropped like a rock. So very few sectors are above water when it comes to the entire year. It looks like really the only one here is consumer staples. We look at that line across; it's pretty close to the midline year to date. Financials, of course, generally perform well during a. Let me see here. Did you see the massive gap up early off the news that Trump may pause? The White House said it was fake, but there was a lot of money being pumped very rapidly. Yeah, I did see that. That's part of the reason the market went from negative 1,700 to up $800 or 800 points just in one session. That's not the biggest swing we've seen in the market, but it's pretty big. And this is characteristic of the management style and the messaging style of this administration. I do think that a lot of countries are probably negotiating right now. The problem with the negotiations is that every country that's having discussion with the United States right now about tariffs and trade barriers, they're speaking different languages. I'm not just talking about the actual language that they speak. This administration views a trade imbalance or a trade deficit as something criminal, or as the other country putting tariffs on us. And that's simply not true. Let's take a country like Switzerland, for example, that just got, I don't know, like 16% slapped onto them. And I think we've all seen the way that they calculated these tariffs at this point. It was just stupid. They basically took the trade deficit, divided it in half, and that's what they slapped a tariff on there. So a country like Switzerland that only has like 8 million people in it is always going to have a trade surplus with the United States. So let's assume that all of us have something that we can produce infinitely in the United States, and Switzerland has something that they can produce infinitely as well and sell to the United States. So let's say we sell soybeans to, I don't know if they were actually selling soybeans to Switzerland, but let's say we sell soybeans to Switzerland. We can sell 50 million tons of soybeans, which is a lot. Probably it's a lot less than that. What I'm saying is, at some point they reach their market saturation point and there's no demand for any more of that product. Now, because there's only 8 million people there. Now, let's say they want to sell us Swiss watches, and everyone in America wants a Swiss watch. That's 340 million Americans that can purchase a Swiss watch. There's just more room for demand here for any product that's actually wanted in the United States than there is in Switzerland. That is the case with nearly every country we are dealing with, is that we just have more purchasing power than they do. And this is the reason why there's a trade imbalance with them. They can produce something that we want infinitely, and we produce some things that they want infinitely as well, but there's limited demand in their country because they're just a lot smaller, or they don't have as much purchasing power. So that's a function of capitalism. That is just simply how capitalism works. The idea that people having a trade surplus with us is ripping us off is just stupid. It's just absolutely ridiculous. If the world is ripping us off, then they're doing a really crappy job of it. We're 5% of the population and 25% of global GDP. I do agree that there does need to be more manufacturing here in the United States. I do agree that I would like for us to sell more manufactured goods in other countries, but we need to be competitive to do that. It's not just trade barriers that are standing in the way of that. The market may have gone up a little bit too on news that the EU was in talks to go to zero tariffs on manufactured goods. This is kind of a poke in the eye to the United States. We do not sell them a ton of manufactured goods. Mostly what we sell them are agricultural goods. So they're still going to keep tariffs on agricultural goods, but they're going to take them off manufactured goods where we know that they're not really competitive in that space, right? So our vehicles, which would be the only thing we'd be really competitive in is construction equipment. So Caterpillar might do very well, but then we're competing against Chinese and Korean companies there for construction equipment. But in terms of our like cars and large machinery items, especially specialty machine tools that are made in like Italy and Germany, we aren't competitive in those spaces anyway. And if we were to remove tariffs, we still would sell roughly the same amount and probably still have the same amount of trade deficit. So these talks with Europe, I think, are a little bit BS in a way. So it seems like Trump questions are very relevant as markets react to his words. How do you think Trump's backs out of this hole? He can definitely stop this decline if he changes his position. So the real question is, why should a president's words on any given day actually affect the market? And they really shouldn't. Like, I've always been of the opinion that the president's policies cannot make an economy, but it can break an economy fairly easily. And Trump has proven now that he can do this twice. Like I said, 11 out of the top 11 lost days in the last 10 years have come under Trump's leadership. And it has to do with his mouth. He just can't shut up. And his policies now are actually breaking a system of global trade that has made us relatively peaceful over the last 70 or 80 years or so. The idea that everyone who can access the seas can trade without fear of countries stopping them or without fear of piracy. And I'm not just talking about like yo ho ho pirates on the open sea. I'm talking about nations actually engaging in stopping trade because it fits their national interest in one way or another, or taxing international trade across the seas because it fits their national purposes one way or another. We stopped that after World War II. We guaranteed safe trade of the seas. And if that is ending, there is no way to predict what's going to happen in the future here. Maybe Congress will stop him, but it's going to be hard. Congress is not going to stop him. There is no stomach in the Republican Party to oppose Donald Trump because they are afraid of his MAGA supporters. They are unreasonable people, absolutely unreasonable people. And I don't see a way out of our current political situation without a great deal of chaos and possibly violence. So I wonder if there's a 3D chess move somewhere. Having people like Elon advising someone would have told him how dumb this idea is. There's no 3D chess move. Trump does not make 3D chess moves. The Heritage Foundation folks who are creating his economic policy are stuck in the 1950s or 1980s, pick your decade. And you cannot resurrect the economy of the past. The economy is changing rapidly here. The value of human labor is going to change rapidly with automation right now in factories. In fact, we should probably take a look at this. The real reason that Elon Musk has gone crazy is not for political reasons. It's because of this. He's being outcompeted worldwide. He's got a stale product line. It's no longer exciting. The vehicles that he produces technologically have been surpassed. There's a great deal of variety out there in markets right now. And even the humanoid robots that everyone thinks are going to do something, he's being outcompeted in that as well. BYD is already using humanoids in their factories, or there's a dozen other companies in China producing them as well. They're already working in factories. In fact, this new facility that BYD is going to be building in, I can't remember where it is, but its footprint is actually going to be larger than San Francisco itself. So there's going to be a factory that's larger than San Francisco. The workforce right now, they're planning for it to be roughly 20% humanoid robots because there's a labor shortage in China. Why is there a labor shortage in China? There's just not enough young people. There may be far fewer young people than we think as well. I've been reading a lot lately about some demographic issues with how fertility rates, mortality rates, and birth rates, they don't jive in the official released figures for China. It may be that China has been lying about their population since the late 1990s, their population growth since the late 1990s. Most estimates place the decline in population beginning in China right around 2008. And it may be a lot worse than we think. I think that if I look at the majority of reports, there are some estimates out there that say that China only has between a population of 300 and 400 million. I don't believe that. I don't also believe that China has a population of 1.4 billion. I think it's somewhere around the 900 million range. And most of that has been an absolute hole in their working age population. The one-child policy kind of screwed them over demographically, and demographics is destiny. They aren't going to survive this, at least in their current form. I think China will survive. It's just they're going to have massive problems, and things are going to change. So, but no, I don't think that there's a 3D chess move here with the tariffs. I really don't. And I don't think there is one with Elon Musk either. If you are a shareholder in Tesla, be prepared. The stage has already been set for Tesla shareholders to bail out Twitter investors. So that already kind of happened with xAI. And the next step, of course, is for Tesla to acquire xAI. And that's going to happen. What that means is just using basic financial engineering. Elon Musk got his creditors for what was a worthless product, Twitter, off of his back. The valuation probably declined by 80%. He sold it to xAI for $44 billion, which is a fake valuation. That is probably going to be acquired by Tesla at this point. And so now Tesla shareholders will be purchasing the Twitter and bailing Elon Musk out at an inflated valuation that's absolutely ridiculous. And that is almost absolutely going to happen. The danger with this is that Elon Musk now controls the largest repository of data on human decision making when it comes to outrage. And I don't think you guys understand what a meme actually is. And I know when I'm speaking to like Gen Z and millennials, I think they understand what memes are. I don't think you do. You really need to read Richard Dawkins. And when you talk about the selfish gene, he's actually the person who kind of coined the word meme and kind of explained what it is as far as a method of communicating using symbology rather than words, and being able to transmit a lot of information with simple images and being able to influence outrage and emotions. Meme makers, for the most part, aren't spreading joy around the world. What they are spreading is hatred and chaos. And now he owns the largest repository of data and an AI company that he's going to use to manufacture memes to influence reality, to influence the way people view reality. So I think that this is a huge mistake, allowing Elon Musk to control all of this information. So his cronies have massive shorts. I'm sure they do. And I'm sure that his cronies are actually, that Trump and Elon's cronies are actually getting advance warnings on some of the things that some of the policy information that's coming out there. I think that's relatively obvious, especially now that we have eliminated some reporting requirements for people in power when it comes to their stock trades. So the only constant is change. Yeah, but the world was changing anyway, even without with this going on. So Bill Ackerman says, we are in for an economic nuclear winter. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. And let me talk about why that is. We just don't know what's going to happen in this case. I do know that if the tariffs stay on and we're really serious about maintaining these to spur economic development here in the United States, this is a years-long project. When folks in power are talking about temporary pain for long-term gain, I don't think you realize just how far away long-term gain is. We have a bit of a labor deficit here in the United States as well. And we've gotten rid of a lot of folks in the construction sector. And I don't think you realize how much capital it's going to take to build all of these new factories. And if we have a labor deficit and we replace all of those people with humanoid robots, which, by the way, I think it's coming at some point, but that is going to be a little bit further in the future than people think. AI training is not like full self-driving. Like AI training for humanoid robots is not like full self-driving. Basically, the only thing you have right now to aid in that is motion capture data from the film industry, which that was all traded and commoditized and bought up by folks that are training humanoid robots. But when it comes to like task specific things, you don't really have AI data like you do with driving, with Teslas, and with all these other vehicle manufacturers that's going to help you out. So the build-up process for training is going to take a lot longer than it has for driving. And how long has it been, at least since 2016, that we've been promised full self-driving for cars, and it's still not really here? Okay. So that process for having really fully robust humanoid robots is going to take a while. There's going to be task-specific robots that are going to be taking some jobs here in the future. But that process, while it's going to start off slowly, it's going to take a while to train everyone. So, yep. The BYD production facility is so large that has its own railway to get around. That's the one that exists now. The one that they're building here in the near future is going to be even larger. But let's go back to this question here when it comes back for an economic nuclear winter. It's really the cost of building all these factories that a lot of people don't understand. Where is that money going to come from? Well, it's going to come from cheap money when demand is crushed here in the United States by rising prices and inflation. Once demand gets crushed and we see the consumer actually take the hit here, we're looking at the consumer taking the hit, interest rates will drop, and that's going to allow people with assets to borrow money cheaply again to build out all of those factories. This is a long, years-long process. When we're talking about temporary, pain for long-term gain, we may be talking at 4 or 5 years before we see a lot here in terms of economic movement. And I don't think people are prepared for that. How long can you weather a recession? If you're out of a job because your job gets cut because of lack of demand, how long can you survive on your savings? That's kind of the issue. So if you voted for this, you voted for pain, guys. All right, let's talk about this here. It seems like Trump is your Brexit movement. Even some of your language Trump uses is the same as Farage's. They share the same brain. It's all performance. I'm not sure that it's really performance. I think he's really just incredibly stupid and stuck in the past, and he wants to revive an economy of the past, and this isn't the past, guys. All right, so Oog says, thanks for the stream, Jason. I'll catch up later. Got to get back to work. Please do another one as soon as you get the chance. Yeah, I'm having trouble finding the time to do live streams. Today, I have an hour or so to do one. So, I hopped on a few minutes late. Did I see you post that you think tomorrow? I thought today was going to be Black Monday. Let me see what that looks like today. It's not exactly Black Monday. So down 752 points today. So, not exactly Black Monday. I saw Grok turned on Elon, calling him the top information spreader on X. Yeah, that was funny. That's not going to last very long. Elon doesn't give a crap about free speech. He routinely censors powerful people who are who go against whatever he says. He routinely does it. I think one of the most telling things that's going on right now is how he's interfering politically in other countries to protect dictators, basically. Erdogan in Turkey right now is facing massive protests, and X suspended all of the accounts. Twitter suspended all of the accounts of the opposition in that country, basically to protect a dictator who wants to revive the Ottoman Empire. Let's. I don't know how much you guys are paying attention to geopolitics, but Turkey's basically been asleep since World War I. It's kind of turned in on itself. But for a period of 500 years, they were an extremely powerful empire, and they are attempting to do that again at this point. They have a large military. They have a military that, for the most part, is trained to NATO standards, and it's a fairly effective one. If they want to take over Syria, that can happen, and it looks like that the current Syrian president is not much more than a tool for the Turks. He's invited them in to take over a couple of military bases. And so I think that this is, and he's also crushing opposition in his country as well. And the mayor of Istanbul was going to run for president. And there's a law in Turkey that says that everyone who runs for president has to have a college degree. And so they got the University of Ankara or University of Istanbul. I don't remember which one, but they rejected his degree. So he's no longer eligible to run for president, and they slapped him in prison. So there were massive protests. There may still be going on. But if you notice, there's not a lot of news being spread about that right now. And they thrown a couple hundred people in prison, and they got rid of their Twitter accounts. This is all Elon Musk's doing. He is supporting right-wing and authoritarian dictators all over the world right now. And you guys know that I don't approve. I don't generally even speak about democracies in foreign countries. I don't think it's my business to comment on that, even though I have like almost zero reach and almost zero influence. But the richest man in the world right now is going around supporting dictators. I think that's a huge warning sign. Normally, our society has leveling methods for wealthy people who get too far out of line. Those seem to have been broken, and that was really done back in the first Trump administration when the Republican Congress refused to hold him responsible for any of the crimes that he committed. And yeah, so I think those guardrails are off at this point. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think we get out of this probably without some violence here in the United States. Yeah, that massive gap is the only reason the SPY isn't lower than 475 right now. Well, it's lower than 475 right now. It's looking like it's about 655 right now, 678. It's bouncing around quite a bit. Look, volatility is going to be the order of the day for the next couple of months. I would not be surprised to see a massive up day just this week, like 2,000 points up just this week. And of course, Trump is going to come out and take credit for that at some point. So, but yeah. Let's see. GC, have you bought anything in the past 5 days? Yeah, I did take a small leap position in SoFi when it hit like $8.99 a share. I bought a couple of leaps pretty far, like 2 years out in the future at a $5 strike price. That's pretty much the only thing that I've done. But that's a 2-year hold for me at a minimum. And like I said, strike price is at 5, so there's some intrinsic value there. Yeah, that's the only thing that I bought in the last 5 days. I'm actually sitting on a ton of cash right now just because the volatility bothers me, not because it's normal market volatility. It's because your investment can turn on a single thing that the president or one of his cronies says. That's always been the case, but in this case is going to be a lot more volatile. So ages ago, I did wonder if it would be Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk that would become Dr. Evil. That now the odds are now in favor of it being Elon. I think it's both, actually. I think it's both. It's just absolutely insane what the amount of hero worship that goes into billionaires. So as a financial advisor, I got to work with a lot of like very wealthy people. And there was absolutely a dividing line in terms of wealth between the wealth that a normal human being with some degree of empathy could acquire, and then the people that got over $100 million or so. And that was kind of the dividing line. You don't make over $100 million by being a good person unless you are Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett has basically, since the 1960s, hasn't done anything other than invest. He doesn't like run companies or anything like that. He just invests. And I'm not hero worshiping Warren Buffett either, but basically you don't get more than $100 million without being a complete tool and without ruining people's lives along the way. Just the acquisition of that much wealth comes with power, and that power always gets abused. So I don't think the Republicans even really like Elon. Not now, but let's remember he has massive control over the media with his ability to create memes. Those memes are transmitted in Twitter right now. They're picked up by other aspects of social media. They end up on TikTok. They end up on Instagram Shorts. Eventually, they get picked up by the news. He's able to manipulate the narrative in a lot of ways. The real issue with Elon right now is that his company is falling apart because they failed to maintain a technological edge. They have simply been surpassed. They are losing market share in what was supposed to be their largest market in China. At least it's frozen right now. They're probably slowly losing market share. Their product line is stale. It's old and stale. They made a massive gamble with the Cybertruck, which for a year or so, I've been saying that the Cybertruck is probably going to fail. That's going to be an interesting niche product. They are predicting 250,000 units sold, going up against the Ford F-150, which is essentially the best-selling car for 40 years in a row. They made a truck that didn't look like a truck. I think the best thing they could do is retool the Cybertruck line to make it an SUV. It would probably sell better as an SUV. Slap in some seats, let people have an actual rear view mirror if that's what they want. So, yeah. Said Warren Buffett is in that same group, if you ask me. Look, entirely possible. Like, I don't know much about his personal life, but let's remind you that he's just been an investor. He's a buy and hold investor as well. He doesn't do any shorting or anything like that. So, Trump just threatened China with 50% tariffs if they don't back down. We lack leverage over China right now. And right now, Trump is speeding up an inevitable confrontation that we're going to have with China. China tends to choose foreign adventurism anytime that they have a a crisis at home. And if you're part of my Patreon group, I kind of like wrote this long article in there about all of the issues that China is facing right now. They have a way to thread the needle here and to come out on top if they can do it right. They have a lot of challenges. Okay. Look, they have a lack of domestic demand and a huge dependence on foreign exports. They've not been able to stimulate demand domestically. They've tried, they have all these programs to do it, but the tendency to save is cultural. It's all across East Asia, Japan, South Korea, China. They just cannot stimulate domestic demand for products in a way that's going to support their own industries, and they have to export. They're dependent on exports. They've got a demographic crisis going on right now. Too many old people, not enough young people. It may be far worse than we think. It may be far worse than predicted. I think that there are roughly 500 million people missing out of China, that they were either never born or they died. I think that China's real population is around 900 million. It's starting to be evident to the naked eye when you start looking at empty airports. The main airport in China, in Beijing right now, is basically empty. You're looking at empty public transportation, and we're beyond Lunar New Year now too. Like a couple of months ago, you could say this is all about Lunar New Year. But the big thing for them is lack of energy resources. They produce about 4 million barrels of oil per day. They consume about 16 million. If you think that China is a military danger to us right now, they are not, because we could literally put a carrier group right here, and we could block 90% of their oil imports. Most of it comes from the Middle East or from Indonesia itself. That's where, and you block the Malacca Strait here, the Sunda Strait, and there's 2 more straits down here that you block. You can do that with a single carrier group. Anything that makes it up here into the Philippines, into the Spratly Islands, is obviously going to China. We could block all of their oil imports. Until they solve that issue, we probably aren't going to face a conflict with them, right? Until they solve that issue. That issue can be solved by building out the pipeline infrastructure between Siberia and China. And they're doing that right now. There's a huge pipeline network that's being planned, a huge pipeline network that's being constructed. I don't think that China and Russia's friendship without limits is really a friendship without limits. I think China would be happy to see Russia collapse economically, which, if the price of oil stays below 60 for any amount of time, that is going to happen. Russia will collapse. Right now, there's a price cap on what they can sell at $60 in the market. If we're below $60 for any long period of time, or if OPEC decides to bump up output, that would also cause a price collapse. That causes serious accounting problems with Russia's economy, and it's probably going to lead to a financial collapse. It's been a slow decay for the last 3 years, but it's really happened. It's really been happening. It's absolutely been real over the last 3 years, and we don't know how bad their demographic crisis is as well, especially considering that a giant ice cream melon scooper has been taken out of their young population right now because of the war. Both because of casualties and because of people of that age simply fleeing the country. But in the case of a collapse of the Russian state, I just wouldn't be surprised to see the Chinese try to march into Siberia, make it a protectorate of some sort, or just take it over outright and say, somehow these people have historical connections to China. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. So lack of energy resources. They simply can't sustain a war with Taiwan. Whatever they do there would have to be short, sharp, and complete. It have to be really short, a massive invasion with overwhelming numbers, and it would have to be completed in a couple of weeks. So we have an issue as well, supplying an army that's 6,100 miles across ocean, or supplying a navy that's 6,100 miles across ocean. That would be a problem as well. So lack of energy resources is one of their biggest challenges. This is one of the reasons why they've shifted to this green economy. This is one of the reasons why they dominate the green technology space. 47% of all vehicles sold in China last year were either hybrids or electric vehicles. And that's going to be even larger this year. They're really kind of trying to get rid of using oil in light transportation. They're investing in other methods of energy production, and they're investing in bringing that pipeline infrastructure, because it doesn't exist right now, that infrastructure between Siberia and China. So lack of energy resources is their biggest challenge. Their next biggest challenge, of course, is political and social unrest. They have a disaffected young population, despite the fact that they keep saying they have a lack of labor, or it's at least a lack of trained labor. They also have 21% at least youth unemployment. They stopped reporting those numbers about 2 years ago because it looked really bad. But when they were stopped reporting, youth unemployment was in 2023, and the numbers were at 21%. So that's pretty bad. Unsustainable levels of debt. Their levels of debt, most of their debt is not held kind of at the national stage. It's held mostly at the regional stage. It's close to 300% of GDP at this point. And a lot of this was bad investments by municipalities and regional governments in companies that went belly up. Now, that happens all the time, but the ability to quantify risk and price it appropriately when it comes to taking out debt, that doesn't seem to be something that the financial class, at least those in government, really have a ton of experience with. And they've made a lot of like bad loans, and at some point those are going to come due. Deflationary pressures. The Chinese market right now has deflationary pressures with declining real estate prices, declining prices for everything basically except food. They have, and this is not good for the economy either. Some people think that the goal of stopping inflation is actually reducing prices. That's never the goal. When you go into a deflationary cycle, people tend to delay purchases, which affects demand, and then investors delay investments, which also additionally slows down the economy. The idea to stop inflation is to get inflation down to manageable levels, somewhere between 2 and 3%. That's the goal in our economy as well, is not to reverse prices back to, pre-COVID. It's to just stop inflation in its tracks, which is not happening with these tariffs going on. So, we don't have a ton of leverage when it comes to China right now over trade. They have diversified their customer base. Yes, it's going to hurt people. Yes, it's going to make goods more expensive here. The price might cut into demand, but we don't have choices when it comes to a lot of things that we buy in our economy from China. We simply don't have the choice. No one else is manufacturing it. We've nearshored a few things. They've moved factories. The Chinese have moved factories into Vietnam, into Brazil. They're looking at moving into Mexico as well. So declining foreign investment is another issue with China. Foreign investment has declined by 99% in the last 5 years from China. That's absolutely unheard of. It's because most of the money is going to Thailand, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these other places that have cheap labor forces, because basically the economy learned from COVID that having all of your manufacturing in one country, where a simple policy from a dictator can change whether or not those factories are open and running, that's just not very good. They want to have some diversity. It's really about diversification, but it's resulted in a huge, huge lack of investment in China at this point. And the last one is manufacturing competition due to that foreign investment going to other countries. There are other countries now that are manufacturing things, and you have a rise in labor costs in China as well. And it's just making China a less attractive country to have things manufactured. And Vietnam is looking a lot more, it's looking a lot more positive these days. But anyway, so let me see here. Do you think that Trump being soft on Russia has made Taiwan less safe? I think it's made the world less safe. So we signed an agreement with Ukraine in 1994 that basically made them give up all of the nuclear weapons in return for a guarantee of territorial integrity from the United States. So far right now, the United States is in breach of that agreement. We have not lived up to our word. The knock-on effect of this is that everyone now with a large and aggressive neighbor is going to acquire nuclear weapons because they just feel that they have to do that, right? That's the only way to guarantee that they're safe from these large and aggressive neighbors. This has really been a failure of not just Trump, but Obama, Trump, Biden. It's been a failure of everyone. In 2014, when Putin marched into Crimea, we should have had a lot more to say to that about that than simply tariffs, but simply sanctions. And we did. We stepped up our program of training the. We've been training, especially the California National Guard has been training the Ukrainian military since 1991. After 2014, that really stepped up. A lot of the fruit of that labor, of course, is being seen right now. I didn't expect Ukraine to last more than 3 weeks. I thought it would be the main combat would be over in 3 weeks to 3 months. And then I thought that they'd be dealing with a 10-year insurgency. I had no idea that it was going to grind on in an industrial war where it's all about output of drones right now. And I don't know if you guys heard, but it looks like the only fiber optics factory in Russia was hit 2 days ago. So there's going to be a shortage of fiber optic drones, and the Ukrainians are far better at electronic warfare at this point, hijacking drones and taking them down using electronic means. We're probably going to see more Ukrainian progress on the battlefield because of that. But I do absolutely think that it has made Taiwan less safe. But I also think that it has made China reconsider how easy it's going to be to take Taiwan. Let's remember that they have a logistical issue as well. Russia can't manage their logistics. That's the only reason why this war has lasted as long as it has. It's not because the Ukrainians are so good. It's because the Russians are so bad. They can't get equipment, people, ammunition, food, vehicles, any of that to the battlefront. And I think that problem is going to be exacerbated with Taiwan, where you're transferring massive amounts of material over open ocean. That's going to be really huge. But yeah, do I think it's less safe? I think the whole world is less safe. And I think that the era of nuclear non-proliferation is probably dead. And I also think that particularly with Iran, the United States is going to go to war with Iran here pretty quickly. They are, producing a basic nuclear weapon is 80-year-old technology at this point, right? We produced it first in like 1945. The basic idea, once people know something is possible, it's easy to replicate that. The idea that Iran with an educated population, competent engineers, basic manufacturing capability couldn't produce a nuclear weapon. That idea is relatively silly. They can do this anytime that they really want to. And if they do that, then our diplomatic pressure on them is very different. We'll never really be able to threaten their homeland again. We'll have to only basically engage in proxy war with them, and they'll be able to hold the threat of nuclear weapons over everyone. And at that point, I basically see everyone else in the Middle East being included under the U.S. nuclear umbrella or developing nuclear weapons themselves. And that's going to spread. That's going to go everywhere. And at some point, someone is going to use them. I think that we need to stop allowing ourselves to be blackmailed on a nuclear basis by Russia at this point. We need to fully commit to Ukraine's territorial integrity so the world knows that we will live up to our obligations. Because right now, the world thinks that we don't live up to our obligations, our agreements. So, okay. How does that make China look if they back down? And how does Trump look if he backs down? It's like we're heating up. Back down from tariffs. So China doesn't need to back down from tariffs. The United States doesn't need to back down from tariffs. We don't have as much. Hold on a second. You are dumb. You don't think a pipeline can be blown up. Yeah, pipeline can definitely be blown up. In fact, it's an incredibly vulnerable piece of infrastructure that has to go thousands and thousands of miles. It wouldn't even necessarily need to be blown up. That's certainly something that I considered, but Nate Highlander. But yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. How does that make China look if they back down? And how does it make Trump look if they back down? Like we're heating up. Like I said, lack of leverage right now. They only take about 7% of their imports from the United States, right? So making our imports to them more expensive isn't very meaningful. And most of our imports into, and most of our exports to China are actually agricultural goods. And China has done a really good job of diversifying their sources for agriculture since 2020, or since 2018 when tariffs were first imposed, and particularly Brazil. I think I talked about this in my Patreon group as well, that I'm not going to be surprised if Brazil's the big winner out of all of these tariffs, because they're going to see a huge increase in agricultural business and a huge increase in manufacturing. BYD is already building factories down there, but especially in soybean production, it's looking pretty good for Brazil at this point. And it may be that Brazil is the only country that's looking pretty good here. So SoFi has had some interesting swings in the last 2 weeks. Absolutely, it has some interesting swings in the last 2 weeks. I'm actually surprised that the value has held up so much, but I think that it's because people are looking at it more like a conservative bank now in the past than a technology. It's more like a technology company. At their core, their basic decision-making process is conservative bank. They're a conservative bank with a technology topping, and I think people, Nate, what the hell are you talking about, dude? I was talking about China. Their biggest vulnerability is their energy infrastructure. And if they build a pipeline, that kind of solves that for now. It absolutely doesn't solve the fact that the energy infrastructure is vulnerable, but they need to solve that at some point before they get into conflict with the United States. Yeah. Anyway, April says 1 ounce of iPhone about to become more than an ounce of gold. Funny, not funny. Actually, I didn't think of it that way, but that's actually true. I think that somebody at Apple was warning that the price of an iPhone could go up to $3,500. Yeah, and I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely going to rise. But let's remember that China has rapidly diversified their supply chain as well. And they did this partially because of tariffs in China. So they went to India, they went to Vietnam, they went to Thailand and a couple of other countries. And now they're getting punished for doing that as well. So I do see prices rising. Like, subscribe, and join one of the most informed and interesting Patreons online. Thank you. Thank you. I've actually, since I kind of restarted this channel, I'm much more dedicated to producing good content for my Patreon blog. And I usually don't share that for almost a week. Like, some of the stuff I'm talking about today is some of the stuff that we discussed on Patreon. And I'm finally sharing that today. So what's your opinion on dividend stocks with the recent dip? So that's a great question. I look at stocks based on total return, not necessarily based on dividends. But right now, a dividend-bearing stock is probably going to have greater total return. Most of your dividend stocks on the S&P 500 are going to be stocks that are concentrated on them being consumer staples. That's like your Johnson & Johnson, your Dow Chemical, all of that stuff. So I would be looking at dividend-bearing stocks that are dealing with consumer staples at this point. The value of those stocks has held up better than anything else. I don't know what the market is going to do. No one knows what the market is going to do. I do know that there's going to be a lot of volatility, at least for 6 months. I think I would not be surprised if we had a 2,000 point up day sometime this week, just based on something that someone says on the market. So, yeah. Don Caesar Sheedham, member of the Patreon group, says hello. Thank you very much. Vietnam offered 0% tariffs, not enough for the Trump administration. Navarro says, yeah, largely because their purchasing power of the individual in Vietnam, they can't afford U.S. goods. They can afford to buy U.S. agricultural products. Zero tariffs on them would be like zero tariffs on agricultural products. What are they going to export to? They're going to export soybeans. That's basically it. And with even with a zero tariff regimen, it may actually be cheaper for them to buy soybeans in Brazil. I don't know the answer to that. But zero tariffs and zero trade barriers also means that Vietnam would be able to sell some of their manufactured goods in the United States. What manufactured goods are we going to sell to Vietnam that they can afford to buy? Right now, have you guys seen the VinFast cars? I don't know if you've seen them around. There's a few of them around here. Probably once a week when I'm driving, I see a VinFast vehicle. It's not the best electric vehicle out there, and it's not the cheapest right now. I don't know why anyone would purchase one of those over say a Kia or a VW or anything. Some people just like to do something different. But those vehicles are going to improve over time. They're starting to kick up their manufacturing because a lot of it is diversified away from China into Vietnam. A zero tariff regimen would probably still be in Vietnam's benefit. We'd still have a trade imbalance with them simply because their population cannot afford to buy U.S. goods other than agricultural products. So if you're covering stocks, what are your favorite or what are your top cybersecurity stocks? Sorry, April. I'm going to cover that actually in my Patreon. And I'm not going to do that right now. I'll cover that in my Patreon because that's something I had planned anyway. What do you have in your watch list? Right now, I have a lot of cash. And I'm probably going to be buying a bunch of leaps here in the near future. That's a way to leverage your money in a bad time to get dollar for dollar participation in the upside of a stock with something like 50% of the value. I tend to buy leaps out in the 2-year range, not in the 1-year range. Let's talk about, COVID, for instance. I bought a bunch of leaps on blue chip stocks like Microsoft, Google, and a bunch of other players when the market was at its lowest. And I made something like an average of 151% or 157%. I don't remember exactly which. And that was just over a period of like 6 months or so. I ended up not having the money to exercise all of those and had to sell them on the market. And a couple of them, they were so high up after a year or so that there wasn't a market for them anymore. So I was forced to exercise those and then, keep some of the stock or sell some of the stock. But that was the strategy I used the last time we had a large, and I use leaps a lot actually. And I'm a buy and hold investor. Usually when the leap gets close to expiration, it's so far in the money, I just exercise the shares at that point because there's not a market for it. So given the tariffs, I read that Nike has decided to just focus on selling in China. I haven't read that yet. But let's remember, potentially China is a larger market than the United States. I don't know that it is. I have a son who's a sneakerhead, by the way, who buys all of his own sneakers. I don't buy any of those. He buys all of his own sneakers. He's got an interesting way of making money, buying and selling golf equipment and buying and selling Legos. So he's got a lot of that done. So the interesting thing is that Nike and all of these companies actually have had a strategy for years that I didn't know about with these like limited editions of different shoes. And so he signed up for this app that gives him like warnings when these shoe drops are coming out. So he can sign up for the shoe drop and try and get it. He'll get that shoe online. It's like $200 and he'll resell it for like $350 or $400 because there's usually a limited run of like 5,000 of those shoes. That's a great strategy that works really well in the United States. That strategy, I don't see being affected that much, by tariffs. The prices are just going to go up. It's everything at the lower end that they sell, the lower end of their shoes. When those prices go up 50% because of tariffs, those customers are going to be a lot more price sensitive. And we're going to see a lot more downside for Nike inside of the United States. Let's remember, we've seen a rapid increase in labor costs in China over the last couple of years. They have a lot more purchasing power than they have in the past. China has been trying to stimulate domestic demand. It hasn't worked. This may be the catalyst to do that. If prices manufactured in China are so much cheaper compared to everything else that they're importing because the whole world goes crazy with a trade war, that may happen. The biggest danger to this tariff strategy that we have right now is that we are actually encouraging all other countries to trade with each other rather than the United States. I'm not going to be surprised at all to see the European Union sign some sort of free trade agreement with China. I won't be surprised to see BYD vehicles entering Canada sometime soon, since because it seems like a lot of people in Canada actually hate Tesla at this point, and BYD was only excluded by the 100% tariff on BYD that Canada imposed. They were looking to move in November of last year. They canceled those plans. BYD was also looking to build a factory in Mexico for delivery. I see quite a few BYD vehicles here living right next to the border. They look like great vehicles. I've talked to a couple of the owners. They were really suspicious of me at first, by the way, but I just wanted to know. They seem to like their cars a lot. Some of them have been on the road a lot longer than I thought. And one of the guys I talked to had already owned his for like 2 years. But they're coming big in Latin America. It's already the best-selling vehicle brand, electric vehicle brand in Latin America. They wanted to build a factory there. They elected not to build the factory in Mexico because they were afraid of technology transfer to the United States. So how the tables have turned. We were always reluctant to build manufacturing facilities for high-tech items in China because of the fear of forced technology transfers or stolen technology. Now the opposite is true. The United States citizens need to realize that our 20-year campaign against higher education and against expertise has resulted in a decline in investment in high technology in the United States, particularly by the government, and it's resulted in us being surpassed scientifically by the Chinese. I do not say this lightly, and I do not say this flippantly. There are more scientific articles now, papers now, and white papers being produced in China than in the United States. And this problem is only going to get worse because they are investing more into research and development. They are investing more into new sciences. Take a look at BYD, for example, as a company. This is a company. They employ somewhere between 700,000 and 900,000 employees, depending on the season. They've got 102,000 employees as of December of last year, dedicated solely to research and development. They've got something like 26,000 patents that have been filed in China and worldwide. I think Tesla has like 3,600 patents worldwide. They don't have anywhere. They've got 125,000 employees. They don't have anywhere near that amount dedicated to R&D. I don't even think they have 10% of their company dedicated to R&D like BYD does. BYD is spending about 100% more on research and development than Tesla is. And that is even worse than it sounds, because let's remember that even with those scientists employed in China, their labor costs are a lot lower than our scientists and researchers and engineers are here in the United States. So the pace of scientific development has picked up in China. For a long period in history, they were the leaders of technology and a center of global trade. I don't want the world to return to that, but it looks like they've outplayed us here by investing in education. They do have challenges, of course. This is when I talk about threading the needle. They really have to thread the needle with backing down on that conflict with Taiwan, solving some of their demographic issues, solving some of their social concerns, social malaise. I think that's kind of what's going on there. But we have fallen behind scientifically. You can rail against that all you want, but the reason that happened is because we as a society, starting 20, 30 years ago, started to disdain intellectuals and disdain experts in their field. This goes to medical experts, it goes to engineers, it goes to scientists of all sort. It just seems like with the rise of the internet, people fail to realize how uneducated they are, and how you actually don't have the expertise to actually analyze something critically, or a lot of things critically, particularly when it comes to science. So yeah. I just saw a post that the Fed is having a closed board meeting today. Yeah, I would not be surprised if they announce an emergency rate cut of 0.25%, maybe even 0.5%, and then probably not move on rates for months. They're going to wait until they're going to do something right now to calm the panic, and then they're going to wait for a few months until the actual data comes in. Let's remember the Fed is always making decisions from data in arrears, data that comes in on a 30, 60, 90-day thing. So they don't tend to respond to emergencies really quickly. They do like a symbolic action of 0.25 point, and then they'll wait to see what's happening a few months from now. And I think that's probably the case right now. All right, guys. I want to thank you guys for watching today. I only wanted to take an hour out of my work day here to talk to you guys about this. Please like and subscribe. Sign up for my Patreon. I know there's not a link in the description, but you can look at one of my other videos. I think the link is on there. I'm really bad about promoting myself. Please like and subscribe. I'll try to do another one of these during business hours at some point, because I know I have a lot of folks that live who watch my live streams who live across the pond, and I'd love to have you guys on there as well. So especially Shula's Joe, Paulo Mateos. Let me see here. Hold on, Michael Wilson, a couple of other guys that I know from across the pond. Thank you for watching my live streams, and I will see you next time.